Hey, cunts, don't forget to click the subscribe button.
You're hot and heavy. Thank you. Last night we, amongst watching my favorite, Mr. Carnegie, you did Goals and Affirmations. And for those of you that don't think this is a coincidence, this is me, and this is Andrew Carnegie. What are the odds? 1 in a billion? 1 in a trillion? When I set out to drag you fucking meatheads across the goal line. You wanted to know if I wanted a trillion or whatever there was, it doesn't make sense? How did that make sense? And then it happened. When I tell you this fucking shit works, I'm telling you what God knows. But you've got to make it work. They didn't just deposit all my money because I zenned it. They didn't, deposit the ownership in my various trusts for the castle and the estate because I, wished it. They didn't deposit all the success that I've had based on my affirmations, and I've been doing affirmations long before I was coaching, almost 28 years, because I hoped it. Arguably, millions of permutations had to happen for me to go from where I came from to the set of pictures below Mr. Carnegie's. Millions of permutations. The greatest act of quantum leap that I've seen in my lifetime happened in 1961 when President John Kennedy, at his inauguration address, said, we're going to land a man on the moon safely within this decade. Most of you in this room aren't old enough to remember that. A couple of you are. At that point in time, the generals and Secretary of Defense and all the Secretary of Interior and all those departments shit themselves because we couldn't even get a fucking monkey, a 3-pound monkey off the ground then. NASA, there was no NASA. We had no infrastructure. We had nothing. We had zero. But when politicians make promises, arguably whether that was a promise or not, they normally aren't around to when it doesn't work out or it does work out, so it's easy for them to make promises. That's how the life cycle of politics works. We didn't know that President Kennedy was going to be killed a couple years later, but there was no NASA. And yet, on July 1969, this is one small man for me and one giant man for mankind, whatever the fuck he said. Not dissimilar to, how can this happen? I went all the, whatever it was. But see, you don't believe it. Hence, ergo, it won't happen. I believed it. I.e., and it happened 15 months later for me. 15 months, that's it. When I said that I want to live in a castle on an island with a moat, yada, 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 it was the spring of 1983, and I moved in September 1984. Not a moat, but, close enough for fucking government work. And I went back and looked at my notes, some of the success stories, some of the horror stories that we've had over the years, and the little dipshits that believed It happened. Didn't happen in 15 months because they're not me. But it happened in 2-3 years. Don't compare your results against mine. You're going to lose. I hope you don't, but you're going to lose because we've never had anybody that's found to do shit like I did. We've got a lot of successes, and I'm not even 400 on my list of rich kids that I've produced. And when I started, the $400 million man, as they used to call me, I mean, the kids started passing that like I was the tortoise and they were the hares, and creating the wealth that they've created in the last 27 and a half years. They've just gone fucking nuts. And I couldn't be prouder than if a newborn babe. In fact, in many instances, I'm more proud of that than the newborn babes I've produced. But if you don't believe it, guys and gals, it won't happen. So far, everybody you've heard has said you've got to accept this as faith. Some have said it, the Word of God, the Word of love. That's a bit of a stretch, but faith. And a bunch of you in this room believe in a higher power of God. A couple of you don't. That's fine. We've had agnostics and atheists create billions too. And I've never done a study. I've never run a study to see did the atheists and agnostics create it faster. Off the top of my head, I'd say no, because we've only got 3 of those in the Hall of Fame. And they were all slow plotters now that I think about it. I haven't really ever thought about that before. Because I don't hardly ever ask myself why. I only ask myself how. But when we go over the goals and affirmations, not on YouTube, some of the kids, when you read them to us, you'll be able to tell that you don't believe, just based on how you write them. See, when I told you that the goal should be bold, bodacious, and when I said that you cannot accomplish in your lifetime, everybody turned blank. And you're thinking, you're processing under the old processing system. Well, why in the fuck would I give a shit? You don't use those words, you don't talk like that. But why in the fuck would I give a shit if it transcends my lifetime? Do you think Bill Gates and Warren Buffett are concerned with the stuff that they're doing just for their own lifetimes? Mm-mm. Now, on the one hand, as the Germans would say, and I don't know why they say on the one hand and on the other. On the one hand, we've got Bill and Melinda Gates, which are doing a tremendous work in their big foundation, and they're not going to live to see all that come to fruition. Even though they're only 10 years my junior, they're not going to live long enough. But they are setting it up. Old man Rockefeller, when he set it up, he knew it was going to transcend his lifetime. And I can go on and on and on. So, but y'all just went blank. Right now, this is a slight exaggeration, and I can't beat up, I still can, Trump anymore, because he's old news. But I mean, in a Trumpism, I mean you're interested in putting food on your table and gas in your gas tank, or now it's not even gas in your gas tank because you plug your car in, I guess. I don't know. If I ever get an electric car, it's because I'm dying of cancer the next day. Those are the odds of me getting an electric car. I want a car that only gets 1 mile to the gallon. Spits emissions, is that what they're called? Shitting, whatever it's called, I want it. So that's not going to happen. But if you don't believe, I'm going to read some emails when we're not on the YouTube. I mean, I cried this morning. I went back to see the guy's file. Who is this little fuckface? No fucking way he did that. No fucking way. Got out of the seminar in 2018. I started to read it to you last night. For a guy that signed his name with an X. He wasn't lying. In April of 2018. Didn't know what IPO was. He didn't know IPO from HBO. 5 dental clinics, 2 dental pharmacies, or where you send the teeth to get fixed, wherever those things are called. Pay up. And now, $7 million euros in EBITDA. You put a multiple on it. Weighed about, I say 80 pounds, maybe weighed 110 pounds. I say he's 5 foot, maybe he's 5'4". But he believed. I said, you can do it if you want it bad enough. The operative part of that is if you want it bad enough. And virtually everybody that's ever come through the seminars never wanted it as much as I did. Nobody. Even the guys that have created 50 billion. Nobody was as hungry. The slide should have Carnegie's house and then my house in East LA, just to make it more dramatic. But nobody's wanted it more than I did. And hence, I made the program work starting with no money. But it's the biggest differentiation of the kids that, for whatever reason, Thomas wants it. Gerard sent me another email saying, I'm very proud to report the close of my 6th deal. The lawyer, trying to make an honest man of himself. It's not easy. Once you don't go down that ugly road of the law, I mean, yeah, it's not easy. You saw last night the namesake of this program, more or less, it's not called, it's the Andrew Carnegie story. And we leave him for last, not just because he's the biggest prick, but he's right up there with the biggest pricks. Comments or takeaways of Mr. Carnegie's life and legend. Yes, sir.
He used visualization when he wrote the letter to himself, and then he went with his mom and the coach at Scotland several years ago. It took him a while, but he...
There's a guy, not dissimilar to myself vis-a-vis my father, wanted to, unshame his dad and make his mom proud that they had to leave town, again, about 35, 40 miles from here, leave town under a cloud of, not poverty, but, failure. Some of you are living under a cloud of failure today. So you should relate to that. But people, it's not politically correct to call you failures now. Now, at best, you're temporary failures. But some people that have come through the seminar have failed at every fucking thing they've ever done. When I ask you what's the highest, we used to ask what's the high point in your life, but we got a lot of shit-ass answers. Now, what's the biggest achievement, high-performance achievement you've ever made? A good portion of the kids that come through here, it was either something they lettered in 2 sports in high school, they got accepted to an Ivy League school. When they say they got accepted, that means they didn't go. I got accepted to such and such, or nothing, or nothing worth mentioning. So if you're 30 years old and you've got nothing worth mentioning as the high point, not high point, I keep going back, high achievement, what's that say? It speaks volumes. I can give a whole seminar on it. Forget that you didn't do anything you think is worth mentioning. Forget that part. which is hard to forget that, but forget that part. Or it's something you accomplished in high school. And now you're 30 or 35. Forget that point, but that's hard to forget as well. Taekwondo. I actually read your papers and remember everything about you, which is unfortunate. When you have a photographic memory, I don't want to know about your Taekwondo. But when I look at you and I'm hearing Thai, Kwando. And if you want to know, he can explain it to you. Don't bother, but he could explain to you what I'm talking about. But that was a high point in his life. So when you don't have anything to put down, and then on top of that, when I ask you what is the highest performing thing your partner's done, or a significant other, or the slag you sleep with, an MBA, accepted to such and such a medical school. And when you say accepted, if you had gone there, you would have said. And then when I ask you the next, so what's the highest performance thing that your parents ever did? It's supposed to wake you up to look, but you're too fucking stupid. Don't you know what you're answering? Don't you know what you're saying about yourself? Don't you know what you're saying about your socioeconomic milieu, your background, your environment? Or is the new generation so fucking thick, they answer those questions, they pass down to the bottom? Oh, God, I'm glad I'm done with this shit. It's trying to tell you why you're here and why you're still searching. And why you're still searching. We have people that pay for the seminar that never come. And don't ask for their money back. You ought to see the look on your face now. Pay for the seminar, never come. We have people come to the UK and never drive through the gate. And just go with their tail between their legs, and the cab driver takes them back to the airport. Why would they do that? Hit it! Self-sabotaging activities. They're so used to engaging in self-sabotaging activities. Now, you're going to get back, for those of you that have kids, within a week, one of your kids is going to engage in self-sabotaging activities, and you're going to see it as that. And if you don't make the correction right there and fucking then, you learn nothing. And the kid's going to cry. And your wife is going to cry. Because if you don't put this shit into action right away, now to me that's not stepping into the breach of anything. But when you decide to correct either your significant other or your children, you'll think, forget the speed bump outside. Motherfucking Mount Everest. Don't waste time on things you can't change. You can't change your parents. Don't waste time on that. I almost never met a guy who didn't want to change his in-laws in some way. Not everyone, but almost everyone. That's like pissing in the wind. And for a woman to piss in the wind, that's hard. It's tough for a gal to piss in the wind. What else about Mr. Carnegie? Yes, sir.
He was self-educated and extremely smart, the way when he was the telegraph boy, and used that to meet the right people and to learn the right things. But at some point he shifted, and he aligned himself with his sort of mentor, father figure, partner, Ford, I forget his name, Thomas, who was the, Thomas Scott. But later, when Scott needed help, he basically threw him under the bus and then repeated it with Frick. He needed Frick for his Coke operation and for his management skills, but then let him take the rap for the breaking of the union and the sort of little
when you go back and look at the newspapers about, they called him coward, and I mean, because he was running away from the gunfire, although he caused the gunfire. And some say that that's why he decided to try to redeem himself, to buy his way to heaven. I don't know a wealthy guy or gal that's not trying to buy their way to heaven, just in case there is one. I don't know one single one. Even the agnostic billionaires and the atheist billionaires trying to buy the way to some place, just in case there is another place. Myself included. Our children get nothing, not a dime, not a penny. The kids say they're cool with it. Sally would say they got no choice, so they got to be cool with it. I think our daughter is less cool with it than the boys. What else about Mr. Carnegie?
This is a question. So the workers, why didn't they just leave if the condition was instituted?
Why didn't his workers leave?
Andrew Carnegie's workers. Well,
yeah, but because there was no alternative place to work. You either worked for the slave drivers, and Andrew Carnegie wasn't the only slave driver, but all of them were the same. There were no tree huggers in those days. Praise the Lord and pass the fucking ammunition. There were no people that were trying to save the planet and save the workers and Me Too and Black Lives Matter and whatever. There was none of that. They had no alternative. And he used a good Scottish firm, the Pinkertons, from Glasgow. In those days, they called him, he invented private eye, Mr. Pinkerton, and they sold out about 10 or 15 years ago for a few billion to one of the big companies as their private army. Those were mercenaries. They would call those mercenaries today. And then when enough people get killed, unfortunately, then the governor puts instates martial law or brings in the troops or whatever they want to call it. They had no alternative then. People make out Mr. Ford won, the real Henry Ford, as a philanthropist because he paid his employees what was considered a living wage, only so he could sell them a car. They leave that part out. The only reason he raised it up to a living standard is because he needed to sell more cars. And so he made it more or less mandatory that every employee had to have a car. Well, it takes a lot of cars off the supply line. And back in those days, I mean, Henry Ford was a big supporter of Adolf Hitler. He got the Iron Cross from Adolf himself. Mr. Rockefeller got the original Rockefeller got the Iron Cross from Hitler for being supportive. Mr. Watson Sr., the founder of IBM, got the Iron Cross, but then when the rumors of the Holocaust came out, he gave the Iron Cross back because we could give a whole seminar on the shitbag icons and how they played our government against the other governments. They supported the other governments with money. I mean, and maybe because it's my age. Maybe I'm one of the last few that knows about all this shit. Because, the Clark Kent over here, he's not Googling that shit. The only real why is why are we so fucked up? That's the only why that requires an answer. Okay, back to Carnegie. He was a less than reputable guy. If I got anointed by the Queen, which I did, with all I say, and Andrew Carnegie didn't even get a fucking knighthood, with all I say and all I do, fuck, he must have done some bad shit. Some bad shit. We've got rock stars that snorted their way to fame and fortune. Sir Ringo, Sir this, Sir that. What else about Mr. Carnegie? Yes, sir.
He know when to take exit.
Well, there's a whole other theory. The reason why he exited because he was afraid he was going to be assassinated. That's the real reason he went to Europe. Because in those days, assassins didn't chase you across the water. Yeah, but he was afraid. And of course, we learned from the other thing, a little clip we saw in Carnegie. He bought his way out of the Civil War for $800 and some bucks. He may be one of the first draft dodgers in United States history. There's no way of proving that, but he's got to be right up there. Yet, he's revered by myself included, and he's revered mostly because of the book Think and Go Rich, which may or may not have actually, that interview may or may not have actually happened. So when you peel the onion back, but you don't peel the onion back on the other guys that are still around doing personal development. You don't. Either you do and you just discount it, and because they tell you it's easy. I'd like to give you the benefit of the doubt that you don't peel back the onion because you don't know almost all of them are charlatans. Not all. There's a half a dozen, 10 of the guys and gals out there that really know their shit. But knowing their shit doesn't create any money. And as our first webinar kid, the 17-year-old, said, he believes that motivation is mainly short-term. And there's been a lot of studies done that motivation, for every hour from the time you leave the motivational center, for every hour it drops off geometrically. And at the end of, that's why, remember I say, I put in my book 21 hours, but in 21 days, whatever good you got from the seminar you went to, motivation, is gone. Depending on what study you want to believe, between 40 and 60% of the products that are bought, the motivational products, never get opened. There's been 2 different studies over the last 30. Between 40 and, they just sit in a box or now on wherever you store shit. Okay. YouTube, thank you.